So, in terms of things, Matt, what is there to talk about? What should we do? There's 10.2 stuff to talk about. There's a little bit of Seeds of Renewal stuff to talk about. We could also, if we want, be a little dynamic, throw in some content based on what's been going on.
Dynamic? Oh my god, like Flight? Holy shit. I don't know. I've been completely out of the loop, so I'll take a look and see what we're gonna maybe see.
Yeah, so you've been out of the loop. We have had interesting things like the most obvious one to talk about is kind of the video we just released in the channel.
Numbers.
About the numbers, which I think do watch it after the stream. It is interesting where Mirdasil is easier. Farak is easier than Sarkarath in normal mode. I think it's the other way around, barely, on heroic mode. But we've actually seen heroic mode first boss kills are up on last tier. Now, some of that's because people will have got through normal in 1.5 raid nights and then killed Gnarlroot. So, that does kind of make sense. But the point basically is there's been times in World of Warcraft's past where you look at the first boss kills in the data. This is first boss guild kills. So, I think guild kills are going to be one of those sort of stickier numbers where I think the ranges will be smaller in guild kills other than maybe expansion launches because, in a guild, your mates kind of keep you in the game because it's what you do together. So I imagine, LFR participation, pugs, I think those probably follow the same trend, but, with more swings between the data points. But yes, the first boss kills on normal mode are still it's an 8% drop or something, which is really good. And that's a level of player retention that we haven't really seen since late BFA and mid to late Legion. So, that is really good. And yes, the numbers are not as big, but it's the whole analogy that I kind of launched the video with is just there's no point in refilling a leaky bucket. Making the damn bucket less leaky is basically the job of this expansion. Do you know what? It seems I've done that. So it was kind of nice to to cover that and actually have some good news.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously not really world content. I've not played basically almost at all, so I just haven't really had the time to dig into it, and I kind of don't need to as much anymore because I can just kind of hop in and do whatever I need to. I'm not supposed to grind to 20 renown to play the game. Obviously, if I was a Mythic Raider and wanted that augment rune, it'd be a different story. But as far as I can actually play the game, it's a lot more friendly for my time and my kind of attention, which, because I don't really have an awful lot of it, considering all the other things I want to do, I end up kind of playing the bare minimum in a way. But that just means running keys and doing raid. And that's a pretty decent way for me to enjoy the patch at the minute. So doing the actual quest, flying around, that was a decent enough experience, all in, a couple obviously cutscenes, but as we covered it extensively,
little silly,
absolute ass. But the general vibes are on point. The Emerald Dreams is actually a nice zone. It's not the zone I wanted, but it is a very nice zone nonetheless. Yeah, and for me, I can see why people are sticking a little bit more. I genuinely can in a whole bunch of ways because it is genuinely a better experience. And I really enjoyed the raid. It's a little bit frustrating coming in and running through normal with no barriers because
normal was honestly kind of like that before
gear.
I mean, okay, obviously the amount of gear that we have now is going to be silly in normal mode. So yes, you got it in absolute paste mode, but it would have been similar to Aberrus Night 1 on normal mode, certainly.
Right, yeah, because even heroic, and I know most of it was there was one element of reprog where we took a few pulls on Laradar, but otherwise we just kind of walked through and wrecked
that would make
everything.
sense for Laradar,
and it was kind of weird because I'm this feels mechanically a little bit too forgiving for me, but I don't know what it was like to prog it, so it's hard for me to say.
Progging it, doing mistakes would screw you over, for sure. I mean, especially in Laradar and. Laradar we progged on a decent little bit. Kind of worth saying for people, we're not a group who ended up with maxed out gear from the previous season.
Not even close.
So yeah, no, with Laradar, progression in him felt pretty good. Certainly on heroic mode, I felt that the damage pulsing that he does that you've got to stand in the seed for. And I get the whole point of the seed is it means you don't die. But it did feel as a healer, if somebody puts bubble down or whatever, there's not really much you even have to do because people take so little damage. So I think there's definitely a few points of some bosses they could have like tuned it up a little bit, but certainly like as a healer, I've enjoyed it. You know, between having the souls to heal on Farak, and then the treants and the brambles to heal. I honestly, I've kind of started liking healing NPCs a little, or just having more mechanics to deal with, especially because you just put radiance on them, and then that gives atonement to all the NPCs, and then you just turn around to the boss and, you know, get slapping, right? Which feels good.
That sounds good. It's hard for me to say because I've only been in for one night, but like the DPS stuff feels a little bit easy at the minute in terms of just like what you're supposed to be doing a lot of the time. In the same sense that it's like the personal responsibility is not super heavy, but one thing is like it's almost one of the things that I think is making it easier to me is how much more obvious everything is. And this is the weird part where how much of World of Warcraft's difficulty came from mechanical obfuscation and confusion.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
And now they're like, hey, this is mechanic, you look at the fight and you understand it. And I'm going to be brutally honest, like our raid leader, or who took my place for this patch, Matt, also called Matt.
Single T though.
Yeah, Single T. He explained all the fights very briefly to me, and I didn't pay attention at all.
Oh, same. Like even on like night one, Matt, he keeps on explaining the mechanics, and you know, I'm just like, you know, the Homer Simpson. You know, like in his head is just a monkey banging symbols together.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I didn't listen to a single thing you said, which you know because it's obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I tried, but I'm not very good at it.
Oh yeah, I tried. It's just it goes away. Yeah.
As I said, I'm not very good at parsing like actual voice an awful lot of the time if it's basic instructions or if it's kind of over there, unless I would rather read. So I had like the like cheat sheets up.
Read?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't do that either.
I read over listening. But I'm
just like pull.
Yeah, so you see this whole modern trend of everything being video content and audio as opposed to just articles. Yeah,
you're a loser.
It's not good for me, it's not good for me. But that's why I like Twitter so much. I can just read lots of posts all day. But where is I even going to that? Yeah, the mechanics are simple enough that I could just kind of intuit them from them happening.
Yeah.
Because they use consistent design language a lot of the time. And if there was, all I would need to hear is, split groups, like on Nimue. And it's like, okay, well, there are two ads, one left, one right. So I'm like, I'm in group 2, so I go to the right. That's it. Then it was like, I was standing the thing. All right, well, I can stand in the thing. What happens? So you stand the thing, it goes away. Okay, I got that. What's that? That's a big line. Well, I don't want to hit by that because that looks like a dangerous thing. Okay.
So, Matt, I don't want to shock you.
Yeah.
But sometimes when we look at we look at Warcraft logs, we have execution rankings that are like 94%.
Yes.
Now, this is very shocking to us because we're all stupid.
Very stupid and can't pay attention.
Now, what does that number mean? Like us getting a good execution ranking. And this is one of those things, it's going to come off like horn tooting, and I'm really not trying to like make it be horn tooting. But if we feel really stupid and we're getting like a 94, what does that say? Now, I have actually had a little bit of a thought on that because we usually raid like 10 to 14 people, usually like 10, 11, 12. Which, I mean, I've always preferred. One of the things that the discussion around FF14 kind of kicked off is people saying, yep, 8's better. Mm-hmm. And hearing even a lot of like Mythic Raiders and stuff, a lot of them just being like, oh yeah, 10. Or people finding, when a lot of the Mythic Raiding guilds went over to 14, finding that experience like quite refreshing. Obviously with World of Warcraft, with, classes, stuff like that, comps, 10 wouldn't work, for like Mythic or whatever. But I have to wonder, if the flex system means that, has the flex system increased the size of the average casual raid? Almost certainly.
Yes.
Almost certainly.
It has.
And that probably means that there's a kind of signal to noise ratio thing going on, because you think about, say, people, in the past talking about raids in Classic, where, you had like a 40-man raid and maybe 15 people were really carrying it.
If even, like.
Yeah, so I wonder...
3 people do mechanics, 15 would do DPS, and that was it.
And that's what makes me wonder if maybe there being 12 of us and us playing together consistently pretty much since Nyalotha, Does that actually mean that we will naturally have pretty high execution ratings because we have a smaller comp versus somebody who's just, flex with loads of people?
Almost certainly,
Yeah.
because we have less margin for error as well because of the smaller sizes.
The other thing that I look at then is those, it's what we call player attention when I'm talking through the numbers in those videos. It's not literally player attention, but, it's like if boss 1 guild kills are X and final boss guild kills are Y, and those numbers are pretty close together, it does show lots of progression happening, because obviously you can't get to the final boss without having killed the first one. I wonder, right? Blizzard evidently saw in Aberrus that them going a little bit easier than Vault led to some pretty damn good participation numbers. And it's one of those things I know, it's kind of, it even goes back to, I remember it wasn't the first instantiation of this long-running theme, but it was like listening to the Blue Please podcast from Total Biscuit back in the days of Wrath of the Lich King, where, at the time he would have been talking about the game getting too easy, the game getting too casual. Because that was, just to be clear, this isn't, saying, he was some crazy hardcore dude or whatever, but like that was a lot of the prevailing discussion around WoW in Wrath, because Wrath is when you see World of Warcraft begin to morph quite a lot away from its more sort of classic roots. But the analogy that I use is that ICC 10 was so many people's gateway drug. So many people's gateway drug, and that was really healthy for the game. And one of the things that I think damaged Cataclysm is there was no gateway drug. If you were playing ICC 10 and that's what you were used to, and you went into Bastion of Twilight 10, prepare it to be ripped to shreds, because the difference was just so crazy. So I wonder if having normal mode be like, what has been an Aberrus and a Mirror, so like Blizzard have evidently kept the same tuning. There's actually, we have a graph of those kind of, retention rates, or completion rate, whatever, as we call them. And you see Vault, right? Vault is, going down like that. The two new raids are going down like that, and then more of a dip towards the end. The raids are literally easier. People are doing more progression. But I just wonder, is that meaning that more normal mode players are actually, there's more normal mode players, maybe more normal mode pugs, maybe that's becoming more people's gateway drug, like that kind of virtuous cycle that was kicked off by Ice Crown 10. I don't know, but evidently Blizzard have sort of they've seen stats, and that's why they've tuned the way they've tuned. And I guess what you were saying then about like personal responsibility in those boss fights, just a lot of that stuff with the mechanics. I do have to wonder, like, if they are just actually trying to respond to the experiments that they're running. Because, like, the first thing I think we all felt in Aberrus was that this is an experiment.
Which was very thematically fitting for what it was. But, yeah.
It sure was.
It's the same thing where I feel like... now, without having gone through, like... Because obviously we'll see what the last couple of bosses on Heroic look like. Because I know we kind of like waded through Aberrus and Heroic as well until we hit Zedskarn. And then we're like, fuck this.
Zedskarn.
Yeah, and then Tharion wasn't too bad, he was a bit of a wall, and then Sarkarath took a decent bit. So like we'll see what Smolderon up to Fordak feels like. And Nimwe's about to fall down. We like one pull before raid end, we got her to 20%. Which is like serious progress without any progress, because it's a simple enough kind of fight. But I think there's definitely a case of the game can be hard if you want it to be hard, but that's only if you're going to be playing. Like if you want the hard experience, it's you're going to get over this wall and you're going to have like the satisfaction of the climb and stuff like that. That's going to be you playing Mythic. That's going to be you going extremely hard on your M+, a lot of the time. But it feels like the rest of the game is being a little bit pulled down in difficulty to be a little bit more like, what's the satisfaction people get? Why do people play the game? And I could argue for days that, well, if you make your game harder and you give people a challenge and you get them to rise to that challenge, players who like challenge will do that and they will enjoy it. But World of Warcraft hasn't been about being this wall to climb in this challenge for a while. So I feel like raids being easier kind of is a better thing you like follow the track of people who want to go in and have their time and see success. And I'm going to say there's a little bit of this comes from my experiences in Japan, which shit. I'll find a way to bring this up every fucking topic for months.
Well, hey, no, it's like one of the things whenever we see so many modern television shows, and this is something I've noticed in Avatar. In Avatar, all the humans look like fucking Californians, or they sort of sound like these modern Californians. Everything's a fucking quip, everything's a quip. Everything's a bit MCU feeling, whereas the actual Na'vi aren't broadly. But you then it's like the new Saints Row game they did, where they're trying to make all these kind of characters hip, relatable, modern characters, and then you're like, you're running a resistance cell against people. If you coming across like that makes you look like an absolute crazy psychopath, which is exactly what people said about the character writing in that Saints Row game. But I bring it up because it does seem like a lot of that is writing from a lack of worldly experience. And then there's people who talk about, say like a Hemingway or whatever, where it's like those people traveled and went to loads of different places and, had lots of crazy stuff happen in their lives. And you can sort of, tell when a writer has actually had lots of lived experience, outside of their bubble, stuff like that. You kind of look at a lot of say like, I would say like modern progressive television writing versus like say Ron Moore doing writing, who obviously, Battlestar Galactica, absolutely, very left leaning show. Is a show a lot of the politics of which I would agree with as well. I'm generally quite left leaning myself, but like you compare modern Ron Moore writing and For All Mankind and some of the very embarrassing modern TV shows, and you're like, one of these people has managed to hit these themes, but in a way where it actually feels worldly and intelligent. Which is to say, as we go to you and going to Japan and having more experiences and having like more ways of thinking about all of this, it almost certainly means you're going to be better, better analysis, better at seeing like other little dimensions to things.
Yeah.
This is why it's exciting.
Yeah. So my point was going to be basically mobile games. Yeah. So,
abort!
Yeah. So a lot of what I did there was go around Akihabara, which is, Electric Town. It's nerds fucking paradise. And it used to be a little bit more, like years and years ago, it used to be more out there geek stuff. The electronic side was taking a little bit of a smaller part over to the like pop culture kind of stuff, which obviously means anime. And a lot of it, every ad was some form of gacha in some capacity. You look at the skyline of Akiba and you say, oh, there's Genshin Impact, there's Honkai Star Rail, there's Azure Lane, there's Heaven Burns Red. Did I see anything else? Nikkei stuff was everywhere. There was Blue Archives of fucking everywhere, right? So one of the things that this is going to make noise, I think. No, it won't. Okay, so one of the things that's funny is because a friend was convinced me, and I also like musical stuff, I'm playing D4DJ fairly regularly, right?
That's a lot of color and visual detail.
Yeah, so one of the fun things about D4DJ is that, and a lot of games are like this, and I didn't know this until I actually experienced it. There's an awful lot of stuff which has, and I'm not going to be able to show you quite like closely, but there's an auto mode. So I've got my voltage, which I get every couple minutes or every like 10 minutes. I need to spend that I can spend that. And if I spend it when I play a song, I get rewards after. So if I want to spend my voltage, I can just have it on auto mode. And I can literally this song will play in a moment. And I won't have to do a single thing, right? It's literally just playing itself. And obviously if I turn the audio on, like, it's just playing itself. And the point there is that
you're thinking about the AI NPCs, aren't you? No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
It's just like whenever Matt logs into Raid, we're like, Matt, if you turn on the AI, Matt.
Yeah. So the point here is that what you want to do is you want to spend your resources and get the things that you're playing for. But what if you don't have time to play? What if you don't want to play to have the satisfaction? And this is like, where's the game? Yeah. So that's the fun thing. Obviously, I actually like playing this, but if I don't have time to play, I also like...
Yep. Can confirm, Matt authentically absolutely loves, lives, breathes everything rhythm games, and it is extremely surprising that you do not have an iPad mini that you exclusively use to play them 25 hours a day.
Yeah, so this is how much I fucking love rhythm games. These are physical cards that you can print from Ongeki Bright Rhythm.
That you can print?
Yeah, so you have your in-game cards, and they're like your team. So, of course, I then, immediately after playing Ongeki for about 15 hours, I just printed my entire Akane team. So I did.
There you go.
Because these are the ones I got. And also, of course, the SSR Marsa, which was about 8 hours of grinding and putting money into the machine constantly to keep playing, to grind currency to get my SSR Marsa. And I printed it.
Now you have it.
Yeah, I actually do really like video games. But the point is...
So to be clear for everybody, that's not you playing mobile video games. That is you in an arcade playing arcade video games.
Yeah, I actually have a photo of it later. But yeah, so the thing I'm talking about is basically easier means you get to enjoy the other parts without having to play the game as much, right? And that's the thing that's, that's the thing that's pretty interesting because... In this case, if I'm playing D4DJ, and like one of the other things is going to be a bunch of like story, and a bunch of like writing and character moments, because the whole point is it's a bunch of these groups of girls that are trying to be like DJ units or musical units. So you've got your vocalist, you've got your VJ, you've got your DJ, stuff like that, and so much of it is going to be other things. So much of it is you get your rewards, you level up the units, you get the story bits. And sometimes you don't really want to actually play the game because you don't play the game. And I was like that before that. I'm like, fuck that. That sounds horrible. That sounds degenerate and nightmarish. And that's not even playing games. What's happened? It's all gone horribly wrong. Horribly wrong. But then I kind of realized, no, that's a pretty valid way a lot of people actually engage with games. And it's not the way I ever would have. But it kind of is how people play things. Whereas like, here's a game, and there's a lot of different parts of that game. And we're starting to learn that people are, or I'm starting to learn, I should say, that people are happier, especially because of like time constraints and things. They're happier to pick and choose parts that they actually want to play and want to experience. So for me, that comes like when World of Warcraft terms, you're going to play World of Warcraft, and what do you want from World of Warcraft, right? Do you want the big like challenge? Do you want the satisfaction of beating the boss? Or do you want to feel the number go up of getting loot? And you go, well, classically, right, in history would have went, so we're going to, we're going to make it worth it, and you need to earn your gear and all that stuff. Now, there's an awful lot of video games where it's like, you earn it by just fucking being there, basically. And this starting to be a little bit more like, in my head, that's more acceptable-ish. It's still, like, I'm still conflicted about it in a bunch of ways. I'm not just going to turn and go, well, actually, here's some rhythm game. My phone has changed my entire perception of video games. But it feels like that's a trend that's going for more people to play more things. And it's actually being, like, responded to by the player base quite well in the long term. And I think it could boil down to like people just wanting, rewards. Matt just needs to accept that people want meaningless good boy points, and that's okay. Yeah, kind of.
Well, and the thing you can do though is you can balance that.
Yeah.
So within World of Warcraft, I think in normal mode they kind of have a good balance there.
Yeah.
It's like, look, there's one of those things. Would I ever advocate for us having loads of idle games and like, hey, AFK Arena? Which reminds me, I need to send a no email address to the 80 fucking millionth agency who's like, hey, do you want to sponsor AFK Arena? I'm like, no,
nope.
No, I do not. But there is a lesson to be learned about why that thing works. And what you can then do is try to take that lesson and be like, okay, this is the lesson, and here is it being used in the dark way. Can this lesson be used to inform us in, how we make games that people can sort of get the experience that they want, that they actually want out of the game more. So in this case, like, yeah, I don't know. I'm pro it. I'm pro it, but I do think there's a wrinkle on that.
Yeah.
I wish that, so back in my formative days playing the game, We only had normal mode and heroic mode. If you've played the game since WoD, that might be a bit confusing. Heroic used to be the difficulty of Mythic. I mean, Mythic's probably harder now, but relatively speaking, right? It used to be that heroic mode was the really hard thing, and then normal mode was the raid. And a normal mode back then would have the same tuning as a heroic mode today, right? That's basically how it works. And one of the things that was good there is you could move from 10 normal to 10 heroic because you didn't have to change the format of your team. And obviously with flexible raiding, that then changes, where now, if you want that extra harder type of content, it's got to be Mythic, and that's 20 people. Now, I would not advocate ruining Mythic 20.
No.
And actually, I don't even think I would advocate doing Mythic 10, because that is setting a benchmark that it is going to be of equal difficulty and all that to Mythic 20, and that for Blizzard is going to cause troubles. I suppose what I would like is maybe some form of optional challenge mode that you could do on top of your normal heroic raid. I don't want to say like, oh, it's heroic plus. Oh, you could do a heroic plus 10 with your buddies. No, not at all. But even something like, in one of those bosses in Vault, you can activate the frog NPC. I suppose that almost makes it feel more like Ulduar heroics. And I know that there are those optional achievements, but if you could just have it be, you get one more piece of loot, and that loot's maybe a little bit better. And, if you really want to do, after you've got Curve, something else in your raid that is... that is harder, but that doesn't mean you've got to change the social structure. As an example, we could probably do the first few bosses anyway in Mythic, and maybe we would actually enjoy that as a team. But the problem is, none of us want to play with more than 12 people because we like our current people, and we don't want to have to recruit more people to our roster, and we don't want to have to think about doing all of the comp stuff and the hardcore stuff. Now, it's really good that that's there for the people who like it, and I'm not advocating for taking that away, but I just think there should be something a little bit more beyond Curve that maybe a group like us could do. And obviously, I think if that was to exist in the context of normal and heroic being what they are right now, I think that would actually be a really healthy raiding experience where there is something to do after Curve that doesn't involve saying, and we're going to completely change how our raid structure works. Because the second you're saying we gotta, have 20 characters, to do Mythic, then that just changes the number of people you need in your guild. You gotta go recruiting, and maybe you just don't want to do that.
Yeah, and that's the fun thing where that was going well for us. We would like to have something a little bit harder that we could chase, and then you have to suggest that maybe it goes both ways. Maybe actually more difficulties is probably better for. Obviously, there's a load of problems with balance. There's a load of problems with how the design of the gearing system works for how okay, well, if you add another difficulty, then how much more effort is that going to take to make the difficulty? How much is that going to impact the gearing cycle? Is that going to throw off balance numbers? Are their spreadsheets going to fall apart as soon as you try that? In the same way that anytime they try something new, their spreadsheets fall apart for an expansion and a half, and then they finally learn to balance and then change something and it breaks. But there's almost like I was saying with this idea, and it's not like advocating for the game plays itself, not at all, but it is that people are maybe playing for a reason other than to feel challenged playing the video game.
Yeah, there's more loops that exist than just the mastery loop.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And the way the game the way the game can support more people not caring about the mastery loop, but instead getting to engage with content and play in the way they want to, in a way, to get the other parts that they want access to. Which obviously in the example I used was, people will grind resources to level up to get a story and not play the actual game. Like that's kind of degenerate. That is pretty much degenerate. You can just ignore the gameplay loop. That sucks. But in WoW, it's not going to be that way. It's like you have to play. You get to experience the content. It's just not going to be hard. In the same way that games have story modes and easy modes at the minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately, because we started talking about this when it comes in numbers, and I think it ultimately does boil down to that the numbers are staying there because people have more access. Now there's a billion different parts. The content could be better. The The content could be better. It could be the residual effect of the War Within and the World Soul Saga being announced. It could be that. That could have a decent part of it. People going, well, I care about the future of World of Warcraft now, so I'm going to stick around more. So there's a little bit of that, but you just kind of imagine that if it's working, then you have to kind of try to figure out why it could be working. And based on my recent experience and thoughts, I definitely think there's a little bit of like going to where the player is, as opposed to trying to put the player in a box.
That's it. Yeah, you go to where the player, and this is, you know what? This is what Cataclysm, in hindsight, messed up. Cataclysm had a clear vision of where it wanted the players to be. And at the time, and in some ways now, I still agree with that vision. But what Cataclysm failed to do was sort of give the players that journey. And then also, I think Cataclysm did have some struggles with content. Because obviously, like, hey, Fireland stuff, great. Yes, we maybe we're expecting more raid content there, but you had the whole Molten Front, right? And people really enjoyed that. But by the time you get to like Dragon Soul's it's a raid cobbled together out of other bits. You don't really have world content coming around with it. I just think Cat is like interesting because they had clear ways where they wanted some of the play patterns of Wrath to be different, and they just kind of went there and did it, but not really in a way that sort of took loads of those players and their expectations to that new place naturally. It just kind of said, hey, no, this is what a dungeon looks like now. And, all of us in the community were like, CCs are good. And I agree. I still have great memories playing those kind of heroics, but yeah, it's interesting because you got your design goals, you've got where your players are, and you can have a perfect and, as correct as a design goal can be design goal. But your design goal is not a thing that exists in objective reality because that reality involves what your players are used to.
Yeah, which is the difficult part of having an existing audience. Where this would be a different story if they were saying, well, Blizzard are going to make a brand new video game and here's what they're going to do. Because obviously, that would still have the conversation of how much existing Blizzard audience, how much you go for existing audiences versus carving your own thing. But it's like, unless it's, and this is kind of the sad realism of things, unless there's an indie that's well funded and able to do things, going super hard towards here's our vision for a small, here's our vision, adapt to it, adhere to it, or don't play our game is pretty risky. Obviously that works in some cases where, you look at FromSoft games, an example. Obviously, they're half the time they feel like the exception that proves the rule. A bunch of time. Obviously, there's a lot of what goes on in the likes of Elden Ring and Armored Core. People go, oh, there's an awful lot more. Okay, cool. Well, there's people, or the audience might not be as, or maybe more open to what looks like a narrow vision to begin with. But I think for World of Warcraft, it's kind of the lesson that Ian talked about learning pretty heavily in his interview with Preach is just yeah, we're going to do what the players want us to do because the players actually have a good idea of what they want, which is, pretty dumb of us not to realize that historically. And you go, yeah, it's, I think designing content for the minority is bad, not going to lie, as designing content for people who don't like MMORPGs. The caveat I would say there is designing content for the minority is fine if you're designing content for every minority. If your minorities add up to a majority, that's fine. But you're basically spot on in terms of make things that people want to play and make them playable in the way people want it to be. And that's kind of where I think we're largely at the minute. Because I saw someone way earlier say that Emerald Dream is one of the better patches for collecting in a long time. I'd said a couple minor things, and you go, well, yeah, that's probably another part of why the retention's up a little bit for rating. Because obviously, well, what do you mean collecting and rating? They're two separate things. But if people are flying around, they're picking stuff up, and they're like, that's pretty cool. The odds of them opening the pre-made group find, they're going, yeah, I'll go do something else. That works too, That works too. You design a game for an audience and the rest go play something else, trying to do all and be all is stupidity. Yeah, trying to be all is greed. But to go to the ancient proverb of, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. So a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush, yeah. So...
Oh, it's better to have the bird you can eat than there be two birds over there that you can't.
Yes.
There you go.
Well done. You
Wow.
you figured out the ancient allegory, or the metaphor. So, to me, that means that Blizzard have a pretty wide audience of World of Warcraft players, and when they're not serving all of those players, they're letting them go to waste. And they're trying to do better, or they're trying to do that way better than they were before. And try to go, basically, they've learned who their audience is a bit more, and that's why things are getting easier. Friend, thanks for super. As I've gotten older, I no longer care about mastery, I care about experiences, which is why AAA is dead, because it's all the same homogenized goop. Same. Big same.
That's the feel, yeah.
I really like Insomniac's Spider-Man games. I have so little interest in playing Spider-Man 2 because I know it's a great game and I know I would enjoy it. But I just look at it and I go, 60, 70 quid for some fucking goop? I'm all right.
And then that's really challenging because I know that you're like, that's pretty good goop though.
Yeah.
And it's also like it is goop that is okay. So in this analogy, right, our goop is a suspension. Like going back in science class, so it's a suspension. It's not dissolved in. So like the little granules in the suspension of your Spider-Man 2 goop, really good granules. It's interesting that I've kind of had a similar yet different experience lately in going to play Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, which is a game that is getting profoundly, it's a game. That's basically its reviews. But the thing is, I'm actually really enjoying it. Because I haven't played a Far Cry game since Far Cry 3. And a lot of those mechanics, like, crafting your bow thing and harvesting the fruit and doing all of that, well, to me, that makes a lot of sense with the game that I'm playing, being a Navi and all of that. But I'm then just thinking, a bit like with you and Spider-Man 2, if I had just played Far Cry 5 and Far Cry 5 Expansion and Far Cry 6 and Far Cry and Horizon Zero Dawn and Spider-Man and this and that, and then I looked at Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, I'd be like, no, I'm not playing that. Whereas for me, I'm like, oh, that's so pretty. Oh, my jump's really satisfying. Oh, that's like a barnacle in Half-Life, but I can ride it up a big branch. And I'm enjoying the verticality, and being a big blue monkey's really fun. Especially because you have your human allies and you're like, ha ha ha, small. Several jokes, many of which are inappropriate, can be inserted here. Image macros that I'm sure you've all seen. So it's that weird thing of like, for me, I've like actively been like, yeah, okay, actually this is a kind of goop that I want to play because I'm not used to that kind of goop.
Yeah, I mean, because it's all about that like kind of freshness and experience. Realistically.
Yeah, which I suppose is to say that like, yeah, it's quite hard to safely make more of a game, even though people will really like it. I even think about something, so take with like Pale Beyond, I would, if we were to make another thing following that, because by the way, next game stuff's going really good. I think we've got an amazing vision. It is like you can tell it's made by the same people as Pale, yes, but it is a, pretty damn different game to Pale. And I just know like, yeah, we could probably do more Pale. And, we could probably do one more and get away with it just fine. But if there's the third one, and it's like, the best version of that, people are just going to be like, yeah, but I've done that before. You're just at that stage where you then, I then think, aliens,
Colonial Marines.
Why'd you do that? No, like, yes, it's unfortunate that then Alien 3 and Alien 4 happen. Yeah. Alien 3 seems like there was amazing concepts for that movie. I don't know if you've seen any of the deep dives into like the behind the scenes of Alien 3. It's insane. But like Alien and Aliens, all the similarities that exist, right? But they are very different movies. It's like action horror movie, straight horror movie, different. But it's like a good way. It's sort of a good way of keeping that franchise going in a way that won't lead to burnout. And then obviously you have your Aliens movies and your Predator. It's like they do Predator, and then they're like, Predator 2, more Predator.
The Predatoring, yes.
Yeah, like Predator 2, what does that remind me of? Friggin' Babe 2, Pig in the City. By, of course, the director of Mad Max Fury Road, which I find to be endlessly hilarious. They're like, what have you done? Mad Max and Babe.
pretty funny.
I have a feeling a lot of people don't really know what Babe the Pig is. Yeah, so, next time you're watching Furiosa, just know that he also made a family, series of family movies about a pig.
Got to get the grift in, like, got to get the reps in somewhere, to be honest, like.
But it's just that thing of, difference in experience. And I think this is where, Matt, we can swing it back to World of Warcraft. Because...
Oh, yeah, that.
Yeah, that thing that I think we're, like, overtly supposed to be talking about. But this is actually where...
I try to dodge it as much as I can.
This is where WoW is kind of... I don't want to say failed, but it's a trap that WoW has walked into. Because, the way people almost meme and being like, 4 new dungeons... Sorry. 4 new zones, 8 new dungeons, and a raid. WoW expansion. And then the people are like, don't care. Because what does their goopy brain want? Artifact weapon, garrison. And I know people might say like, oh, well, this didn't always work out perfectly. But it was a big new, like, this is novel. Which obviously, when Dragonflight is just like, hey, we're really trying to get our fundamentals better. P.S. A raid, 4 zones, and some dungeons. People just don't get excited. And that's really a struggle for Blizzard to, like, really keep the numbers going. And I think that's also what Destiny 2 has ran into. It's ran into big problems. I mean, you guys have probably seen the coverage we've done on the news channel. But also, it's a seasonal live service game. And they have found a production model for what a season is that they can make. But...
factory line video games.
Yeah, because people are then like, Season 15... And there's a struggle there. So it's why, like, I'm really happy with Delves coming into World of Warcraft. And I'm happy that, the way they say, and in Midnight, there'll be something that blows your socks off. That at least is telling me that they're quite aware that they need the hype of a build-around feature. But they need to get that via a sort of feature that expands and grows the game in a way that people genuinely find exciting, that then doesn't have... all of the the literal negative problems of those systems when they're alive, but also the negative externalities that come along with them that are sort of not really thought about at the time of implementation. So yeah, I suppose that's like, even, if they took the Dragonflight stuff and they, imagine the Dragonflights were 4 covenants, and that would be a way of framing that. Obviously, people will go, covenants, no. So imagine Covenants didn't happen. But if they were to really sell that as being like 4 Dragonflights, you can be a member of each one and it's all different. That's like a way of framing it where people just wouldn't have thought more renowned bars and rep. So it's kind of interesting as we kind of work into that, because from Blizzard, it's like they could do the best 4 zones, 8 dungeons, and a raid that they really could. And for some people, that won't be enough to get their attention. In the same way for you, you're like, oh, I really enjoyed Spider-Man and Miles Morales. Spider-Man 2, though, it's another one. Even though, by all accounts, it's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's the really awkward part where you kind of have to go, well, there's a balance to it, believe it or not. You can have the most exciting thing in the world and your fundamentals can be shit. And no one will play your game. And you can have the best fundamentals of all time and nothing exciting and everyone goes away. And I think that's maybe that's kind of what happened to Destiny. I know Destiny maybe flopped the fundamentals every now and again because of how they just changed stuff and it didn't work too well. But I think that's the part where we're now in a world where World of Warcraft can do that. World of Warcraft has built fundamentals that everyone's like, this kind of slaps. And then they get to go, well, here's a patch. We're going to little fiddle around with the like the fundamentals of endgame and make them better and more enjoyable. And they're clearly in a part where that's working better with all of the retention stuff. And that's the World Soul Saga is going to be like, hey, we have exciting things. We have exciting things coming, such as a story that we thought about. We should have done that before, but we're doing it now. And remember the guy you like, he's back. Remember the guy that made you happy, he's back.
Oh, Malfurion.
No, Thrall. Remember the guy that you didn't like because we kind of shat on a story in Shadowlands? He's back, Anduin. Remember Elf Knife Wife? She's back. Please be excited. And all the other things going on. But yeah, it's just they're getting things right on both fronts is what I'm trying to say, realistically. whereas a lot of places are failing one or the other. And it is frustrating because this is, like, obviously I was pointed out a while ago, people are super happy to pay however much a year to play the new FIFA or the new NBA or Call of Duty.
That's where it's interesting with COD.
That's like an interesting audience kind
because
of thing.
COD is trying, if COD was just single player campaigns, we'd have this discussion about, about Spider-Man 2. But people don't just go, oh, it's another COD, I don't care. Because what they're actually getting is League of Legends sold to them every single year for $70. Because Call of Duty it's the sort of thing that I call a forever game, right? Like that kind of game where, like League of Legends or Counter-Strike, where people just play that for 10,000 hours. Or, 2 Fort in Team Fortress 2. Yeah, and you can just play that for, you can just sit there and play 2 Fort for 500 hours and somehow that makes sense. That's what Call of Duty is. Just that Call of Duty is giving you an entry fee every year. Yeah. So to think that Call of Duty is sort of succeeding in the same way that like a Spider-Man may succeed, very, very, very different, because COD is basically just like if Riot said, and to play League of Legends in this season, you must give us $70. To which people will obviously give them $70 because they want to continue playing. Which is kind of interesting. Now, there's a really good super here from Vrin, and it's one that it definitely speaks to me. I think it might speak to you as well.
it did speak to me, and that's why I mentioned it as soon as I came in and talked about it.
Oh, I'm really sorry. I was going to talk about the mastery loop.
Go for it. Work away.
So we didn't talk about that bit.
Yeah, I didn't talk about the mastery loop, but I talked about the homogenized thing.
Yeah, so you're talking about the homogenized loop. The other side is the mastery loop. Because I remember when I was a kid.
Sorry to hear that.
And I know it was a terrible time. Big mistake. Shouldn't have been born. But anyway. And being a real blowhard about WoW. Just being like, if you're going to turn up in this fucking raid, you better be prepared. You better be squared away. If we don't kill this boss, real people will die. And not really, but like, you're like that. Or, you're playing Call of Duty 2. And you're just thinking, I could win the tournament. I could get more than just a wham bar for 4th place. I could get 2 hours of free time in the LAN center. And then maybe I could go to an Insomnia in the UK and play COD 2. Which, like that side of the mastery loop. And I guess the reason why I wanted to bring up with you, because you talked about it with the Goop games, but your experiences in fighting games. Ooh. And your experience in a lot of those games where there is a mastery loop. Certainly the win-loss rate between, us in Smash is very funny. Very, very funny. It's one of those things where it's like, yep, I don't have the skills to beat him. I've lost, and I will always lose. Other than one fluke where Matt makes a really stupid mistake, or, is daydreaming. And I'm like, he's daydreaming. Time to go for his weak spots. Yeah, that's the other side of it.
The mastery loop. It's just
a diminishing of the mastery loop for other parts, because I care about experiences the same.
Yeah, mastery loop's an interesting one, because I certainly felt the hook of that playing rhythm games again properly. I'd just be like, there's maybe a little bit less mastery, a little bit more actually getting into flow playing something like super hard difficulty. But yeah, I think the mastery loop is maybe this is a pretty unformed thought, so I might just talk absolute shite. As the gaming audience has gotten very, very, very big and broad, and as culture has moved,
I thought that was just me.
Nice. No, I imagine. No, don't finish that thought, you dumbass. So as it's
well done, Matt. Well done.
I have had to turn my self-censorship up quite strong since coming back. Imagine just having no filter for 2 weeks and say whatever you want to people, and then you come back. Because even in public, I could say whatever I want because no one fucking knows any English. It's great. It was brilliant.
Oh boy.
But no, so one of the things is, what was I even talking about? Yeah. gaming culture's largely changed to move away from the actual master loop as a part of video games, because that used to be so much more of a video games were.
Everyone tries to make a boomer shooter. Or not a boomer shooter, an arena shooter again.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's always the same thing. Hey everyone, we're bringing the arena shooter back because everyone really cares about playing an arena shooter and being amazing at it. And then it has a nice little launch spike and crickets.
Yeah.
Because people are used to what you were talking about with your phone earlier.
Yeah, there's a fucking tweet that was, and this is technically slightly different, but there's a tweet from someone saying that, and someone tweeted it, so they could have just made shit up, I don't know, but it was something about how their kids or their kid and their friends or something were like talking about game ideas and things, and there was a trend that this person noticed that was the kind of game ideation that came from younger generations was more about resource loops and grinding resources and getting them and spending them in the way, they're maybe thinking like survival-y crafting kind of games. Whereas they said that whenever they were younger, they remember things like basically game ideas were more or less ideas for adventures and stories and stuff that had game mechanics attached. And there's like a pretty decent shift in overall gaming culture towards a little bit more of that. It's more about resources and things as opposed to adventures and fun. Which you say, well, does that mean that you're moving away, in the same sense, we've moved away from arcade games and master loops? Slowly and slower and slower.
Your master loop is also incentivized by I could continue playing without putting another quarter in the machine.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a little bit of that. Apparently, that was mostly an American thing.
Okay, so just imagine, when people talk about like poor man shoes.
Yeah,
I don't know what is it of like. There's some joke of that where it's like, oh yeah, bad players who are bankrupt versus skilled people who just play the whole game in like one quarter. But interesting, that's mostly an American thing, not Japan.
Yeah, apparently that was just money hungry Americans. A lot of like Japanese arcade games were substantially easier.
Really?
Which is funny because you would imagine it's the opposite. Apparently that's the case for like old beat 'em ups and stuff.
Wow.
And they just turned the difficulty up moving to the West because the Western distributors were like, more money, please. More profit. But yeah, I feel like we've largely moved away from master loops as a whole. And obviously World of Warcraft was never initially about the master loop because it was exploration and discovery and all those things, and Classic wasn't fucking hard. So I feel like there's a little bit of just cultural shift away from that. Now, obviously, you look everywhere and there's people engaging in master loops, right? There are people who absolutely love fighting games. There are people who love rhythm games. There's people who love, character action games. And like every game has a speedrunner who's destroying it to pieces. And that's like a part of mastery as well. But I feel like the bigger portion of the money is likely in other parts of the gaming experience, just as naturally as games have moved away from being limited to being, well, what's your game loop? My game loop is you shoot man, and you shoot man faster, next level. Whereas now you go, well, what's your game? And it goes, well, here's story experience, loads of big things. Basically in the sense of, like, it's exemplified by story difficulty modes in AAA movie games. That's the exemplification. That's the perfect, like not the perfect. That's like the final form of it, where it's like you're not actually playing a game. You're kind of watching a movie. So I feel like that's the extreme end. And people are rightfully going, well, where's the video game? But I feel like there's this whole spectrum of video game between you're playing Dive Kick and you're playing The Last of Us in story difficulty. Like there's something in the middle here. Like
that's great.
Yeah. Dive Kick some crack. But yeah, I think there's so much in there. And I think there's so much leaning away from the master loop side. And that's evidence in World of Warcraft being a little bit easier and having more players that are happy to engage with it for that sense. And you could even argue, will PvP being maybe like a lower rung like priority for the developers is probably a part of that too. Because PvP is, I'm not going to get into this PvE or PvP harder, but PvP is like the sweatier one. Like
it is sweatier.
Because you're fighting another opponent, which means that has an infinite loop of scaling up of difficulty. Because, you beat the mythic boss and you beat the mythic boss and it's dead. The boss doesn't go, actually, let's go for another round and I've learned what you do, so I'll beat you there. whereas PvP has the infinite skilling, and that's the part of it. Like, so I feel like it's kind of the logical end of where I was talking about the Master Loop, where I think Master Loops are great, but I think culturally games have moved away from them, and gamers have moved away from them a lot, especially aging. I think
That's why we need to trick them.
aging will do that as well.
You trick them with their mastery loops.
Maybe
Maybe there's something to be said as well between sweaty and non-sweaty mastery loops. Maybe we're still good in mastery loops, but there's like more of a, I don't know, sweaty mastery loops are maybe only good in certain circumstances. Right, versus, you know, a turn-based strategy game that's really, you know, quite hard, strategic versus, you know, playing Valorant. Because, like, obviously, the sweaty, you know, mastery loops are humongous in the likes of your Valorants and your, you know, LoLs and stuff. I don't know. Yeah, it is quite interesting then as we age and, you know, time. Well, it's one of those things of, like, at what point do you accept your aging? And
never,
at what point?
Absolutely never.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You die believing you're 18 years of age.
But like, at what point do you just realize, like, I don't have the time to practice in StarCraft 2? Like, unless StarCraft 2 had the dad ladder where you had to, like, send your social security number to Blizzard and, you know, it's like, okay, you're verified, working 40 hours a week, have a family. Okay, we're only going to matchmake you against people who've got, like, a similar amount of time to practice. Because, you know, the dad mastery loop, we can go in and do that.
Yeah.
But when you know, like, oh no, I'm going to be playing against 18-year-old me. He had time to practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he skipped school all the time.
Same donuts. I get the vibe. No, so Stormgate's going to do really well then.
Well, Stormgate actually is very aware of that.
Yeah.
Where they've been putting a lot into having their equivalent of the co-op commanders mode.
I was gonna bring it up, and I thought I'll wait because I'll just send you off in one for like half an hour. If I just go, well, Stormgate and co-op commanders. Yeah, I was gonna say about co-op commanders being like, well, if you'd said, well, what are people going to play more in StarCraft? Going to play, you know, the hyper sweaty 1v1 because that's what StarCraft is, or are people going to maybe gravitate to the one that's a little bit more comfy?
It's like, nah, follow what people do, and what the StarCraft team learned is people played more co-op commanders in Legacy of the Void than they were playing other game modes.
Because it's less stressful, more relaxing, more comfy. It's not about the master loop, it's about having a fun experience. And not to say master loops can't be fun. Obviously, the whole point is it's fun. It's just a different kind of fun. Yeah, reflexes do get worse with age, but reflexes in the vast majority of cases can be overcome with like knowledge and understanding and ability.
Okay.
That too. Also, like reflexes don't get that much worse, unless you're like top end playing like of a shooter.
I think we can make some cellular gaming dust for adults.
Oh yeah.